Another day, another art gallery, and yet nobody's looking at my work. I was at the brink of giving up on my dream of becoming a well-known artist. I could swear that the likes of Da Vinci and Picasso didn't put in as much effort as I had done to showcase my craft, and nobody still gave a damn. My mother stopped talking to me after I abandoned my degree in medicine to become an artist, but I was determined to prove her wrong, and until her death, I never proved her wrong. Standing in this gallery, the only thing that crossed my mind is regret. Maybe if I had done what she wanted, she'd still be alive. I never understood her pain until now, working as a cleaner just to support her only child through medical school for 10 years without a husband. And then after bagging my degree as one of the best graduating students, I broke the news that same night to her that I don't have any intentions of practicing. She begged me to think about it, but my mind was already made up. I was going to be an artist. She couldn't stand it whenever she'd walk in my room and saw me painting instead of getting a real job and assisting her at home. So one day, she kicked me out and told me never to call or talk to her until I began to think right. I didn't bother about it because I thought this would be a good story to tell the world when I'm finally up there. It's been 5 years now, and I haven't sold not even a single painting. This was the life I chose over the happiness of my mother, and now she's gone. I got frustrated, so I took down my paintings and walked out of the gallery. On my way back home, I came across a store. I was curious to know what they meant by magic, so I went in, and an elderly man offered me a set of magic paints and brushes. He said they were going to make my dreams come true, but they all looked just like the ones I had at home. So I just laughed and commended him for his marketing skills. I was about to leave, but he still insisted I buy the paints. And if my dreams didn't come true after I made use of them, he was going to give me a full refund. That sounded like a nice deal. So I bought them, and he said one last thing to me.
Be careful what you dream about.
I didn't understand what he meant, but I was like, okay, weirdo. I got home and decided to try out these new paints. So I drew a cat, and then I went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I couldn't believe it. Lying beside me was a black cat. I've never had a cat in my entire life. How did it get in? I looked at the painting I made of a cat, and I looked at the cat by my side. It was exactly the same. I almost began to panic, but I needed to be sure I wasn't dreaming. So I painted a crashing plane, and a few minutes later, the media broke the news of a plane crash that just happened in the city with no survivors. I felt guilty for what I'd done, so I ran back to the store to ask the old man what the hell he just sold to me, but he was gone. The store had become a boutique overnight. I got approached by the salesperson, and he asked me if I needed anything. I told him I was looking for an old man who claimed to sell magic paints, but he was looking at me as if I was out of my mind, and he said he's never heard or seen anyone like that. On my way back home, I began to ask myself if those people died on that plane because of me. I knew this was no coincidence. It had to be real. I got home and was about to dispose of the paints, and that was when my mind began to run wild. What if I kept it and only painted beautiful things with it? What if I painted things I've always dreamt of having? I became more intrigued with the possibilities I could achieve with the magic paints. So I began to paint whatever beautiful thing came to mind. Lakes, sunrise, sunsets, rain, clouds, and many more. Every single thing I painted manifested in real life, so I saw this as an opportunity to be famous. I requested an interview with a TV station, telling them whatever I paint comes to life. They were skeptical about the whole thing at first, but later granted me the interview because I knew they wanted me to ridicule myself in front of millions of viewers. But I went up there and killed it. I painted a portrait of rain falling with thunderstorms, and it immediately began to rain with thunderstorms. It drew the attention of the government, and more people from the media wanted to interview me, and that was how I became the most famous artist ever, with people wanting to pay me whatever amount I wanted to feature my works in museums, magazines, art galleries, you name it. I was on the front page of all the newspapers and TV shows. Even the government paid me whatever I demanded to help them paint harsh weather conditions that would destroy their enemies' camp, and I was honored to serve my country. I was now getting everything I ever dreamed of, but my mind was unsettled. I wished my mother was here to see how successful I had become and the name I had made for myself. And then it hit me. I could actually make a painting of my mother. I haven't tried to paint a human since I got the magic paints, but if it brought an animal to life, it probably could bring back a dead human too. So I painted my mother and went to sleep. I woke up but saw nothing. Then I began to hear someone humming in my kitchen. I knew the voice sounded familiar, so I went to the kitchen, and there she was, my mother, right in the flesh. I ran to hug her and told her I'd missed her, but she asked me if I was all right. I'm like, yeah, and she told me she's been with me for the past 6 years. Why was I missing her? She had no idea she died 6 years ago, and I just brought her back to life, but I wasn't going to tell her that. I wanted her to see what I'd done with my life and hear the words every child wants to hear from their parents. I'm proud of you. I couldn't hold back this discovery, so I granted a press conference and disclosed my new achievements to them, bringing back the dead. I showed them a video of my mother now and a photograph I took at her funeral. What initially started as an opportunity to show my craft became a business. People would come to me to paint their dead loved ones back to life, and I would make sure I charged them heavily for it. I was no longer painting beautiful things. I was now Jesus, and I was raising the dead. I made sure my mother never left the house and she never knew the kind of painting I was now doing. Everything was going pretty well for a while, until the beautiful things I painted were becoming a huge problem in the city. All the schools I painted were shut down because a school shooter was particularly going to my schools and gunning down innocent kids. The bridge I painted over the large lake that connected my city to another city collapsed, and every vehicle on it drowned, and nobody survived. More tragic incidents were occurring, and the cameras were on my face again. They wanted to know why these things were happening, but I had nothing to say. But none of these things would even come close to what began to happen next. I was watching the TV one night when I saw a dead man I had painted back to life, arrested and sentenced to life for unaliving his wife and kids. That wasn't all. More of my human paintings went on a killing spree, so the government summoned me. They wanted me to stop painting. After all I'd done for these people, this was how they want to repay me, by taking away the only thing that makes me feel seen. But I didn't stop, in fact, just to piss them off. I kept painting more dead people at a discounted price, not because I enjoyed it, but because it made me feel relevant. I didn't want my name to just evaporate like that. But deep down, I feared for my own life because of my mother. Although she didn't show any signs that she might do some crazy shit. She was sweet to me, even more than she used to when she was alive. So no matter what happened, I told myself that I wasn't going to let go of her. Not until I came home one night and found my cat without life. I asked my mom what happened to her, and she told me she couldn't withstand the cry of the cat, so she had to silence it. My worst nightmares were beginning to come to life. My mother would no longer talk to me. She wouldn't eat her food. She just wanted to be alone. I started to spend more time in my art gallery than at home. One night, my gallery was broken into by the people of the city, and they made sure they destroyed every single painting in it. I was devastated, but the messed up part was that everything bad that was happening because of my paintings stopped. Not only that, the people who I painted all vanished, just like that. I then realized that all along, that was the solution to the problem, destroying the origin of the problem. When the news got around, everybody who had ever bought a painting from me destroyed everything. I no longer had a painting to my name, except for one, my mother's. No, I wouldn't do it. Even if they'd take my life, I wouldn't destroy that painting. I knew they were going to come for it sooner or later. So I fled the city with my mom and moved us into a cabin in the woods. I was living in isolation together with my mother for 3 months, and I'd say that was the best months of my life, until she started behaving the way she did during the period she killed my cat. She wouldn't eat, she wouldn't talk, and she wouldn't sleep. I was hoping that she'd eventually come around, but she didn't. One night, she stabbed me while I was asleep. When I woke up in pain, I saw my mother holding a knife over me. She continued stabbing me until I pushed her off of me and ran out of the room. She followed me and pushed me to the ground, trying to pluck out my eyes with the knife, but I held her hands. She was stronger than I was, and I knew she'd eventually get to stab me again, so I began to plead with her to let me go. I cried and cried and cried, but she had lost all empathy. I managed to push her over, and the first thing I saw was her portrait. I knew what I had to do to save myself, but I didn't want her to be just a memory again. I also couldn't fight back because she was my mother, and I wouldn't want to hurt her, so I resorted to my last option for survival, the portrait. I took it off the wall and smashed it on the floor, and she was gone, just like that. I lost everything. I couldn't paint anymore. I was now wanted in my city. After spending 2 more weeks in the woods, I was ready to face the world again. So I moved to another state to start all over again, but this time to do what my mother always wanted for me, practicing as a medical doctor. But I wasn't going to let go of my art. I threw out the magic paintings and brushes And I went back to the ones that never brought me any luck. And I would make paintings and put them on the hospital walls. The patients loved looking at them. And I even taught a couple of them how to paint as well. And that has helped them with their depression and longing for something beautiful. That was the greatest fulfillment I ever felt as a failed artist.